Hello everyone, welcome back to another haul video. This is going to be a haul video going way back to warmer days, sunnier days, depending on when you're watching this video. This is going to go back to July of 2021, and this will be all of the things that I got during the Criterion sale. And sorry that this has taken several months now to catch up on, but I'm kind of catching up with a bunch of other things. I've been preoccupied with all the things going on with my podcast, Chasing Labels. There's been a lot doing there with all kinds of really exciting announcements when it comes to Blu-rays and 4Ks from all kinds of boutique labels, including Criterion. So for those of you who have not seen this video series here on my channel, basically it is a monthly or bi-monthly haul video of all the things that I've gotten in that specific time frame. This happens to be everything from the July Criterion sale, and I thought I would just make it just about that sale because that sale is rather unique to all the collectors like myself, and also I would like to separate things when it comes to August and September, and then now of course October, but we'll get to that much later on here on the channel. First up here, let's get into these Criterions. First up here is Nightmare Alley, a film starring Tyrone Power and Joan Blondell. This is an adaptation of the novel of the same name, I believe. There is also going to be a readaptation of that novel coming out sometime this year, directed by Guillermo del Toro, so I am super excited to see that. But in the meantime, if you haven't checked this film out, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely fantastic. It came out in 1947, and it's black and white, and really interesting take on kind of the carnival life and all this kind of stuff, and it's really interesting. Next up here is probably a film many of you already know of, and this is the Bong Joon-ho film Parasite. I had already bought this on its original Blu-ray release, but this Blu-ray release comes with just a plethora of special features, more so than I thought there were, so I had to get this even though I already own it. So kind of an upgrade when it comes to special features, as well as a rebuy. There was also a 4K UHD edition of this that is just a regular edition that doesn't have these special features, that was put out around the same time as the original Blu-ray. But if you're going to get a release specifically here in Region A land, this is probably the one to go with. You get the best package and the most special features. And the next is a DVD to Blu-ray upgrade, and this is from a film that I bought way early on in my Criterion collecting days, and this is the Sidney Lumet film, The Fugitive Kind. This is a really great film starring Marlon Brando and Anna Magnani and Joanne Woodward, and this is a film that kind of gets a bit lost, I would say, in Sidney Lumet's stellar filmography, especially his early filmography. And I've always really liked this film. Came out in 1960, and just Brando being really fantastic. It has a similar Rebel Without a Cause feel to it. It came out around the same time in that post, James Dean era. And of course, I believe James Dean and Marlon Brando were contemporaries. They were friends. And this is based on a Tennessee Williams play, so a lot of social themes going on here as well. Next is another DVD to Blu-ray upgrade, and this is Samuel Fuller's Pick Up on South Street. It's another DVD that I had bought way back when, in an era where I didn't think that this would ever get a Blu-ray release, but I'm so glad that it finally did. I can add it to my Samuel Fuller section of my collection. And Samuel Fuller is a really fantastic director, just absolutely astounding. His work has been featured on the Criterion Collection in many different ways, and this is one that I've always really liked. This stars the great Richard Widmark, who I always thought was a great actor, perhaps a little bit underrated in my opinion, and this is a really great film to watch around Noirvember time, which is coming up soon. Next is a rather interesting film when it comes to Blu-ray releases, especially recently. We went from having no Blu-ray releases to having several Blu-ray releases, as well as 4K UHD releases too. And this is David Cronenberg's Crash, and this is a incredibly unique film. It's done in such a Cronenberg type way, just pushing the boundaries when it comes to content on screen and themes and all of those things. This film stars James Spader, Elias Koteas, and it's basically about people who really get a thrill, sexual thrill for the most part, when it comes to car crashes and mayhem and things like that. Kind of adrenaline junkies with a sexual twist to it. and it's a really fantastic, interesting film. And there's been a 4K UHD release of this in Germany. There's been one put out by Arrow Video, and there's been a Blu-ray put out by the Criterion Collection, which I have here. And what is interesting is I believe all of these have different extras. So if you want all of the extras, you may have to get all of the releases if you are that big of a completist. Next up is a film starring Sylvia Sidney and Frederick March, and this is directed by Dorothy Arzner. This is Merrily We Go to Hell, and Dorothy Arzner is a fascinating individual because she is one of the only women who was making and directing films during the golden age of Hollywood. Women were really kind of relegated to other filmmaking roles and not quite directing, so she was one who was able to kind of break through that ceiling that was put there at the time. And we got Merrily We Go to Hell, as well as Dance Girl Dance, which is also part of the Criterion Collection, and I really like this film a lot. It's dealing with a lot of interesting contemporary themes, and I highly recommend it for anyone who is interested in Dorothy Arzner's work and who Dorothy Arzner is. You have a few special features on here that are really insightful into who she was and her impact on film. The next is a film by an all-time classic director that I'm sure many of you have heard of. This is Andrei Tarkovsky's film Mirror, and I initially wasn't going to get this release. I initially was going to hold out because I have an inkling or a feeling that we will be getting an Andrei Tarkovsky box set at some point in the future. That seems to be what Criterion is doing with a lot of its more well-known directors, but this packaging was just too good to pass up on. It's a nice thick box here, comes with 2 discs I believe, and it's a really fantastic release. And Andrei Tarkovsky, I will always get any of his films and watch any of his films because he's that good of a director. And then next up is an Anthony Mann film, and this is The Furies. Talk about big, thick box editions here. Look at the size of this. This also comes with a rather large book, and this I remember being on DVD for the longest time. I saw this at nearly every single Criterion sale I went to at Barnes & Noble. For years, I saw that DVD, and I was so glad that this finally got a Blu-ray release because it's a really good Western. Anthony Mann Westerns are really unique and really interesting, especially for the time in which they came out. They were kind of darker and grittier when it was compared to kind of the John Ford films, and so I really like this film a lot. So, moving on to another stack of Blu-rays here. First up is Dee Reese's film Pariah. Dee Reese is a director who is having her first time foray into the collection, and she chose one of her early films, I think maybe her first film, in Pariah. Fantastic contemporary film dealing with a lot of LGBTQ plus themes, and it's a really fantastic film. Many of you may know Dee Reese for her film Mudbound, which came out a few years ago, which was a Netflix film. I think that's getting some type of Criterion release sometime soon. Hopefully it does, but don't quote me on that. Next up is a film by Donna Deitch, and this is Desert Hearts. This is a film that I've been circling when it comes to these sales for years, and it's a really great film, underrated, kind of unnoticed film from the 1980s. Once again, dealing with LGBTQ plus themes similar to Pariah, but a little bit different, and I really like this film a lot. This is a super underrated recommendation for me, and I really like to thank everyone out there who's already seen this film and has kind of, promoted it and recommended it because it's a worthwhile recommendation. Next is a Mike Leigh film that I have been waiting over a decade to finally get into my collection, and this is his film Secrets and Lies. This is the first ever Mike Leigh film I had ever seen. This was the film that made me a Mike Leigh fan, and for years and years and years there was a DVD that was long out of print, really tough to get, and I was just waiting and hoping someone would put this out on Blu-ray somewhere, and it ended up being the Criterion Collection, which kind of makes a lot of sense because they have a bunch of his other films in their catalog. So this is a fantastic, phenomenal film with a lot of familiar faces from Mike Leigh's work, and I can't recommend this film enough. And next up is a bit of a blind buy, and this is a film by Hao Xiao-hsien, and this is Flowers of Shanghai. For those of you who watched my video of going to the Barnes & Noble Criterion sale that first day, you know that I picked this up as a blind buy, and all these months later I still haven't seen it, so it is still relatively a blind buy for me, and I just kind of wanted this film because it looked very, very interesting. And I know Hao Xiao from his film Assassin, which came out a few years ago, and I believe that's the only film I've seen from this director. So I'm really looking forward to finally diving into this. Next is another blind buy for me, and this is the signifying works of Marlon Riggs. Just a series of short films, I believe from 1986 to 1985, by Marlon Riggs, dealing once again with a lot of LGBTQ plus themes and things of that nature, and just a really interesting set of work from him. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this. And next is another Bong Joon-ho film, which I kind of should have paired with the other one, but it was in a different stack, and this is Memories of Murder. This was another film that I think a lot of people waited many, many years for it to come to Blu-ray, and it is well worth the wait. This is a phenomenal film from the early days of Bong Joon-ho's filmography. This film came out in 2003, which is now 18 years ago as of this recording. It's kind of incredible if you were around in 2003 and realize where we are now. So this is a really phenomenal film. I know this was a hot seller at the sale this summer for good reason. And the next was another blind buy for me, although it's no longer a blind buy for me because I've seen it, and this is David Byrne's film True Stories. And this film is an interesting kind of quasi-narrative, quasi-documentary, or faux documentary, if you will. Very unique when it comes to the mind of David Byrne, and I really enjoyed this film a lot. I remember when this came out, a lot of people were buzzing about it, and it made me very, very interested to check it out. And I'm glad that it did. It comes with a unique packaging here. Of course, it's more of a digipack than a regular standard case, and of course it has this really cool cover. And the next up is quite honestly one of my all-time favorite films, and it's really a film that I've watched many, many times. It's a screwball comedy. It stars two of my all-time favorite people in film ever, and this is Bringing Up Baby, starring Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. And I can't fully explain how much I enjoy this film. The energy that this film has and the chemistry that Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant have is so unique and so great, and I just always enjoy watching this movie. I've had the 2-disc DVD for years, and I watched it to the point where the disc was actually freezing, so I really needed to get a new copy, and this came along just at the right time. This was one of my highest priorities at the sale, to be honest with you. This film is also directed by Howard Hawks, the great Howard Hawks, so it has a really great screenplay to it, great snappy dialogue. I can't recommend this film enough. And then moving from way back in the golden age to more modern, literally more modern, this is Martin Scorsese's Irishman. And this was a film, of course, that came out on Netflix a few years ago. This was a passion project for Martin Scorsese, as I believe all of his films tend to be. And this is kind of a gigantic, gigantic film. It's a teaming up of Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, who came out of retirement for this film. And of course, it's another film by the great Martin Scorsese. I could not buy this at some point. You can, of course, watch this on Netflix right now without having to buy this, but you don't get all the special features. And I just love hearing about all the making of, and Martin Scorsese talking about movies and his filmmaking process. All of that stuff is endlessly fascinating to me because he is the great Martin Scorsese, and I just love hearing him talk endlessly about movies. The last film I have here in this stack, and certainly not the least, is Frank Borzegi's History is Made at Night, starring, I believe, Jean Arthur and Charles Boyer. And this is a fantastic, great film that I watched on the Criterion channel a few months ago. I believe well before I had bought this, and it was well worth the watch. And the quality for this release has got to be better than the quality that I watched on that streaming service. But it doesn't change the quality of this movie, and the quality is very high. I just really love this film. I've really just become a rather big fan of Charles Boyer, and I've always been a big fan of Jean Arthur. I just feel like she's relatively underrated when it comes to her contemporaries at the time in which her career was taking place, and I'm just really glad to get more of her work in my collection. So I did indeed save the biggest thing for last, both figuratively and literally, and this is the World of Wong Kar-wai box set. This is a massive set. This was such a hot seller during the sale that it was selling out at many stores and selling out online several times, and it's just a massively thick, also relatively compact set of several of his works. And for those of you who don't know who Wong Kar-wai is, he's just an absolute master filmmaker. The films in this set are As Tears Go By, Days of Being Wild, Chungking Express, Fallen Angels, Happy Together, In the Mood for Love, which is probably his most well-known film, and then 2046. And the main thing with this set, or a lot of the talk about this set, is that Wong Kar-wai did go back and change the aesthetic of a couple of these films, as well as the aspect ratios of a couple of these films for several reasons I don't really need to get into, because you can probably read up on all of those things online. But I'll say this, what we have here is a collection of masterworks from an absolute master. So if you want, to get an abundance of his work and just learn as much as you can about Wong Kar-wai, this is the set for you. If you want to hold on to some of those old Blu-rays because you prefer that aesthetic or those aspect ratios, you can still find them, I believe. They may cost a little bit more because they're probably out of print at this time. And if they're not, people are, holding on to them and jacking up the price when it comes to being on eBay or stuff like that. This is definitely something I want to give a proper review for at some point in time. As I say for many of the other things, I just want to make sure to go through all of it first, go through the films and the special features. I've seen several of these films already, so a lot of them will be a really happy rewatch for me. So that has been it when it comes to the July Criterion sale for 2020 for me. Thank you all for watching, and if there's anything else that you want to see in any more depth, please let me know. And if you like this video, please check out the other videos on my channel, and please subscribe as well.